But first and foremost, we're going to have a look at today's news headlines with political commentator with Young Voices, Noah Khogali. Noah, good afternoon to you. So what headlines have caught your eye? Because there's plenty of them out there.
Good afternoon, Trisha. I hope you're having a lovely Sunday. There's obviously a couple really big stories this weekend. First of all, from a very Anglo-centric point of view, we've got Beergate and shock horror, a champagne socialist, acting like he's a bit high and mighty and not the same as the commoners. I'm sure everybody is as shocked as me personally. There's no sarcasm whatsoever there. And then the other big one, obviously, being the Northern Ireland Assembly elections and Sinn Féin's victory. That's a really interesting one.
That is a really interesting one. It takes me back to way before you were born, probably before your mum was even born, when we had the Northern Ireland troubles and the turmoil that went on. Let's start with Keir Starmer, because of course we went through Boris being fined and what have you. And Keir Starmer was kind of pointing the finger. But as I always say, when you point a finger that way, you've got three fingers pointing back at you. Definitely it seems that the pigeons have come home to roost for Mr. Starmer, does it not?
I know, for a man who was so critical of the lying, it seems like that is almost the thing that's what's caught him out in the end. I feel like if he'd been up front at the beginning, and I feel like I'm having a little bit of deja vu here, because I feel like I've said this before, but if the individual was honest from the beginning about the situation, why decisions were made and what actually happened and who was there, this probably would have gone away a long time ago. But that's not where we've ended up. I think, to be honest, a lot of comparisons have been made between Keir Starmer and Boris. Boris's alleged rap sheet is a fair bit longer, so I think the more apt comparison is probably between Keir and Rishi Sunak, who Keir Starmer also said Rishi Sunak should resign for his very, very, very minor breach of the regulations, which was obviously just walking into a room, there being something that wasn't work, and then him leaving. And Keir Starmer said that Rishi Sunak should resign over that. So by their own metrics, Keir Starmer should be long gone by now.
No, here's an interesting question for you. I'm looking at you. For those of us who can see, you're a young man. Can I ask how old you are?
I'm 21.
21. Now, here's a question, because the political landscape and commentators, by and large, are older people of a certain demographic. Here you, as a young man, young people, seeing all of this going on, amongst your friends and what have you, what is the discussion about? Is it about, can we trust? I mean, you are the future of Great Britain. What is the conversation about getting involved in politics? Because when I was young, we'd sit around and we want to get involved in politics and change. What are you a bit jaded by all of these sort of tit for tat and lies and all this sort of thing when you were doing it tough during COVID?
I think first of all, as somebody who is talking about politics on a Sunday, I'm probably not representative of most of the young population in this country. But from people I do speak to, the response seems to be, well, this is cementing our vision of politics as something where people say a lot of words, don't actually follow up on them, and everyone's just a bit disingenuous. I don't think that's always accurate, but that's the vision that they're getting from the media. And it kind of cements this apathy that we've, for years, been talking about how to solve. And it's this kind of story that's really frustrating, because it does put people off. And I, for one, was worried that we were going to see really, really low turnout at all of the elections that happened last week, because, especially over COVID, why would you vote if you didn't feel like those people were, number one, following the same rules as you, number two, representing you? Why would you get involved in that system? Thankfully, it wasn't as bad as I feared, but that amongst young people is definitely still a concern. Not so much the, at the end of the day, rather inane curry, birthday cake, any of that, but it's the lying and the media storm that seems to follow this around. We're not talking about the things that matter to young people. We're not talking about housing very much. We're not talking about cost of living as much as we should. Even something like Ukraine is missing out on headlines because of curry, because of birthday cake. And fundamentally, that's going to put people off, because it just seems ridiculous.
I have to say that's why I'm really pleased that TalkTV works with young voices, because you are the new generation of commentators, and hearing that kind of opinion from you, good. You're going to give our politicians an even tougher time than we oldies do. Let's talk about the Sinn Féin gains in Northern Ireland. That's quite historic, isn't it?
Yeah, this is really interesting. And I'd like to preface this actually, but so I was actually at uni in Belfast. And I came over from, obviously, the mainland to Belfast, and that political landscape was nothing I could even imagined. This is, it's a big moment, but possibly not in the way that everybody thinks it is. So there's been lots of talk about Brexit, lots of talk about what this means for the union. I would suggest that lots of those fears are slightly overplayed. There's not going to be a border poll. Sinn Féin were really careful to not make that what this election was about. They've not got a mandate for that. That's not what they ran on. And fundamentally as well, the people that didn't vote DUP this time, they've not suddenly turned into Republicans. They went and voted for the TUV, who, for anybody over here that doesn't know, is essentially a slightly more conservative version of the DUP. They've not really gone anywhere. And lots of people voted for Alliance, lots of young people especially. And they're kind of seen as the small U unionists. So very much going, right, this is the situation. Let's not talk about constitutional issues. Let's just talk about making Northern Ireland, a modern place, progressive place that can be the fantastic, fantastic part of the UK that it can be. And the constitutional issues are left to the side. That's hopefully the future. And I really hope that we start talking more about the success of Alliance rather than, the DUP and Sinn Féin, as we have been for decades.
Absolutely, but there have been mentions of reuniting Ireland as well. Do you think that's going to gain any traction?
I think it makes good media headlines. I would be very, very surprised if we see that anytime soon. Like I said, it's, this hasn't really changed the fundamentals of Northern Irish politics. Ultimately, although Sinn Féin won, I would be very, very surprised if we saw Michelle O'Neill as First Minister, in the next few months, possibly in the next few years. Northern Ireland has gone without an assembly before. It will do it again. We'll do it again multiple times. And at the end of the day, those same divisions are still there. They've not changed. People weren't flipping. People that voted DUP aren't suddenly voting for the SDLP or for Sinn Féin. They're just voting for other unionist parties. The unionist vote is now split, whereas the Republicans have consolidated theirs. There's almost just been a reversal of what we've seen in the past. This hasn't changed the fundamentals. It's possibly just changed, what you look at from a very Anglo-centric framework, which is simply who has the most seats.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you've got two women heading up Sinn Féin as well. Whatever their politics, I couldn't help but see, for women around the world, when you see two women there, you sort of think, wow, okay, maybe we're going to start going the way of many of our Scandinavian countries and get some more females in there.
Arlene Foster as well was First Minister for a good chunk of time as well.
Yeah. Well, we can only hope that the same is replicated in the Parliament over here. Don't hold your breath anytime. No, thank you so much. And it's really interesting. Thank you so much as well for giving us your personal bird's eye view of how young people see the political landscape, because I actually don't think we hear enough of that. Here you are, I'm criticising our own media. We don't actually hear enough of that unless it's on youth TV or something. I think that we should have more and more young voices feeding into and giving us a dose of reality for what older journalists see as the big story, who drank what and ate which curry. You guys are asking the really important questions of what happens to the future. So thank you so much for your contribution this afternoon. Noah there talking some really good sense. It's lovely to, as I say, to hear a different voice.